Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Bill Connor, and for those of you that have registered to join us live, thank you. You can register at autovitals.com/radio and be able to get our episodes where they're all loaded in a nice little file, and also find it on many of the podcast platforms like Apple, Google, and a whole bunch of other ones you can pull up. So here today, I've got Greg Masewic, a Meineke multi-shop owner, one that's been doing a very good job of educating and delegating responsibilities to a large amount of staff that he has, and transitioning to digital world. And I've also got AutoVital's very own Chief Innovation Officer, which we really rely on to go ahead and keep us out in front of the marketplace so that we're always innovating. So today what we're going to explore is workflow and labor management inventory, and how changes from the past to today's digital shop benefit everybody in the shop. So today's focus is going to be on process changes and strategies to maximize your labor inventory and increase production with your existing staff. And the key here is with the existing staff, because we find out nationwide across all shops, and there's a wide term that gets used to go in and categorize somebody as a technician, but on average, as far as productivity, a lot of statistics show that across the industry, about 5 hours billed, paid, and posted on a daily basis is what's being produced. And we can certainly do a lot better than that. And we've got, the proof from shops that we work with. So Uwe, what I'm going to ask you is, do you want to go ahead and first define what labor inventory is and use some examples on it, and then go into the different workflow steps? Or would you like to go into workflow first?
No, if I can, I would love to pick a third option. And that is, let's talk a little bit about why workflow management is such a awesome thing. And then I would love to hand over to Greg and let him describe how it all started, where we couldn't even spell workflow management, right? And how it is now, because often by looking back, we realize, wow, what a difference, right? And if we're in the middle of it and still doing it, we're not really so aware of the differences. So workflow management basically started, we just talked about this earlier, Bill and I started collaborating. Bill was running a shop 2013, 14. That's also in digital inspection, became a big deal. And we realized just giving the service advisor and the technicians another tool in addition to the other tools they already have to master, that's not enough. We have to find a way to eliminate busy work. And that's how workflow management got created. And now we have a tool which we believe is pretty flexible for all different types of shops. But today we want to really focus on the foundation of workflow management. Any of the workflow steps we're going to talk today about are necessary. I don't think they can be skipped, but you can add a lot more. And what it does overall is it allows you to manage production, and production determines hours produced. And that is what this whole thing is about. How many hours, build hours, can I produce in a certain period of time? That's the whole name of the game. And workflow management helps getting a constant overview of where we are. And labor inventory management, it's a fancy word for how do I dispatch technicians the most, the smartest way to maximize production. Have I passed your test, Bill?
Awesome. So as long as you've opened door number 3, let's go ahead and go down that path.
So we started working with Greg. Greg, do you remember that? It's a while ago. 4 years, 5 years.
5 years now. Yep.
And
it's been a journey.
And it's been a journey. And you had at that time, I think, one location, if I'm not mistaken, 1332.
Yeah.
And now we are at what number? I lost track.
We're at 5, and we're a week away from closing on number 6.
Very awesome.
Yep.
And so if you could summarize, how it was before when you had 1332 and then you got involved in workflow, and going digital, what were the biggest hurdles or differences looking at this from now?
Yeah, so in the beginning, like everything, right? When we went from paper to paperless, there was a lot of fear, right? A small amount of pain involved, right? It's everybody kind of trying to rewire themselves and rethink about how they do it. And we had our, struggles, right? It's, our then manager, now general manager, Paul, it's a pretty famous story, I think, at this point, but we spent about a year and a half of him just clawing at the floor and refusing, right? He was a manager running a really successful shop. We threw this, this whole bucket of wrenches at him and, said, here's the new way you're going to do it. And he really had a hard time seeing why any of it made any sense. Right. And, I've got this thing nailed down. Why would you make me change this? And he was convinced that we couldn't get another dollar through the doors of that building. Right. It was maximized. And it literally took about a year to finally get the light bulb to go on in his head. And since, he will be the first to tell you that he would retire before he'd go back to the way it used to be, right? And for what it's worth, that's the sales in that shop increased almost $700,000 once we really got humming with SmartFlow and workflow and all of that. So
and that if I may, that's the same staff.
Same staff. Yep. Same amount.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It literally added almost $700,000 a year in sales, right? So it went from 1.2, 1.3 up to about 2 million. So it was there, right? And it was just a result of everything that comes along with SmartFlow, right? The better, more consistent inspections, the workflow, the working a lot more efficiently. I think when we talk about workflow, and I don't know if I might get ahead of myself a little bit here, but I think the breakthrough for us was workflow is really always, the workflow steps have always existed, right? Every car that comes in onto our lot goes through those same steps that are laid out on the TVP, right? It gets here, it's here for its initial work. It's waiting for the initial inspection, then it goes to, looking over that inspection and estimating the job. Then it goes to waiting for approval, then it goes to waiting for parts, then it goes waiting for work complete, and then it goes to waiting for pickup. And that's been true since day one. I think the biggest difference with having workflow and auto vitals is in the past, it was all just running around with your hair on fire, right? And never really being sure what step any car was in at a particular moment without running half a mile down to the other end of the building and kind of getting an update for a tech. Now at a glance, right where everything is and what step it's in. And that increases efficiency tenfold, right? It's just, it's a quick glance, right where that car is, and everything just moves more efficiently when we do that. And it's better for the techs too, right? There's less of that wait time. They've got 2 or 3 cars queued up, in their, on their end, on their tablet. And if they submit a car and they're waiting for the service advisor to build an estimate, there's none of that, standing behind him for 5 minutes while he's talking to somebody waiting for their next instruction, right? They just go get their next car and they get started on that one. So just always, techs are just kind of always working on a car and always producing. There were, I shudder to think how many hours we were losing with that all of that
right.
weight in the past, right?
And
that's the biggest thing for efficiency.
Back to what you said in the beginning, if you don't know that it can be better, you of course say, I am already at the best shape I can be. Yeah. What are you talking about, right? Why would I change that? And so there is this famous / infamous story about how you made Paul, not run around and stay at the at the service advisor desk.
Yeah.
And can you talk about when the light bulb went on for him? And because I want you to tell the story for two reasons. One, it's an interesting story at what length you went, right? Some people might have given up before.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it illustrates so nicely that if you go the traditional way, everything is in somebody's head, in this case in Paul's, and needs to be updated constantly. So you have the status of the current status right in your head so you can make decisions, right? And he found, or many service advisors, or now, managers, find that having that in your head is the best place. Forgetting that running around or getting asked questions is one interrupt after another.
Right.
And there is nothing worse, and that is completely independent of what activity you do, whether you write software, whether you work in a shop, whether you train for a sport. Interrupts are poison because they take you out of what you're doing, force you to remember it somewhere, right? Stack it somewhere, do what the interrupt requires you to do, and then go back and get it back up. And where was I? What was this thing? There are enough studies out there which basically say if you want to create consistent output, eliminating interrupts is the absolute best and most successful way as a first step before you do anything else, right? And since auto repair shops basically life in an auto repair shop is a sequence of interrupts, right? So that's, in my opinion, one of the biggest advantages. But I would love to hear your story.
Yeah, and I think it goes to that, right? Multitasking is a fallacy, right? It's actually, no one on the planet is actually capable of doing it, right? We all trick ourselves, think we're good at it. And with Paul,
especially men, if I might point that out.
I agree, myself included, right?
Yes.
So one day we're going to prove it wrong. We all believe that, and I think, it speaks to successful service advisors. That whole description you just gave, I think they wear that as a badge of honor, right? The fact that they can, that's that whole service advisors or Superman thing. And they're really not happy unless they're running around with their hair on fire, because they think that's what makes them valuable, right? And that's,
right.
They, that's why you need me, right? I'm the guy that runs around and puts all these fires out and can juggle all of these things. So kind of turning their heads a little bit to say it, that's great, but it's, how about if that wasn't necessary, right? How much better would you be to concentrate for more than 3 seconds on one thing, right? With Paul, I literally put a bench in front of the counter, and told him that that's where he stays, and that didn't work. I threatened to put a seatbelt on the bench and strap him to it, right? If it didn't change, and even that took a little time. And then it finally just came to that conversation of, that honest hard conversation that we're all afraid of is, look, this is where we're going. You're either coming with us or you're not. But this on the shop, you have to make the decision one way or the other, right? If you're not willing to do it, we're going to have to make a change. How about this? Try it my way for 2 weeks. Let's see what happens, right? Got him to bite on that. The results were pretty much immediate, right? That his day-to-day life improved, and since then, he's as I've gotten more shops, it's hard. I'm less and less day-to-day stuff involved, right? And now he's my Auto Vitals, enforcer. He goes around to every shop, and he's the hardest guy, right? he's no, they're not doing it right, So he drank the Kool-Aid. It took a long time to get it into his mouth and down his throat, but once he drank it, there was no turning back, right? And I think for shops that are starting out or struggling, I think that's the best advice I could give, right? Is hang in there, you might have to have those honest and hard conversations, right? And you may have a guy who just refuses that you can't get through, and you may have to make a change, right? But it'll all be worth it. For us, it's been, I can't even tell you how worth it it's been for us, right? Made huge changes, and everybody's life is better. The techs are making things are smooth. The day is smoother. It just, it brings joy to this business.
And if we ask Paul when the light bulb went on, was it a one-time event, or is after the 2 weeks, or even earlier during the first week, he came to you and said, "Oh, I didn't realize XYZ is better." Did you remember those times?
Yeah, it was kind of after those, after that conversation in those 2 weeks, right? And because, even when someone says they'll commit to doing it your way for 2 weeks, the first 3 days, they're still in denial, right? They're still,
right.
They're going to try to figure out a way to prove you wrong, right? So,
right.
Well, they'll even sabotage it a little bit if they can, right? Because nobody wants to be wrong, especially men, right? And especially successful men.
Right.
And and it was really, it was a matter of me being right next to him, right, to make sure, that we're staying on that track. And after those 2 weeks, day by day, right, things were just kind of a little better, a little easier, making more sense, right? And he'll also be the first to admit that he sabotaged himself, because he'd be out there with the text complaining about it and didn't understand why we would.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So he was, he just kept putting bullets in his foot, right, as he was doing that. And he had to get around, right, is to, wait a minute, you hated this yesterday and today you love it. I don't believe you, right? A little time for that to happen. Once he got there, it was, like I said, it was once we got, once we had that, once he had that epiphany, right? It was almost instantaneous, that how everything in the shop just got better.
Very cool.
So the whole premise of the workflow and the labor inventory management really has come about because we really want to go ahead and make the techs and service writers and everybody more money. And in the past, we had to wait till they, put their payroll reports together to find out whether they passed or failed, so to say. And then, we've got to where maybe we could do a daily report. But when we started getting into the workflow management and the labor inventory management is a highly visual tool, we could make adjustments and corrections before it ever got into a bad paycheck. So, that's kind of the nature of the visual tools that we wanted to make sure get put together.
Yes, yeah, that's a great point. And that's another, I didn't even think of that. That's, our guys are constantly looking at where they're at, right? They can see it right on their tablet. They know what they've got, they know what they've got for sold hours. That makes them feel good because there's a lot of sold hours always now. And they know how many they've completed. So they're invested minute to minute, right? It's never a mystery. They're never, to your point, Bill, they're never finding out on Friday how they did last week. They know right now how they're doing.
Right. So why don't we go, I don't know, Bill, I look at the clock and we're almost half through and haven't even really started. So maybe we look at 1332's workflow and lean back and let Greg explain how it works.
So I don't have their workflow, but I've got a different shop, but the numbers are going to be the same.
Yeah, that'll work.
You can never tell what I might come up with. Let's find the right monitor. And I'm going to make the assumption that you see a shop.
Yep.
With some green bars, red bars, and so on. So if you kind of want to explain a little bit about where you're doing and kind of guide my mouse to the right places, so that way we can show other people exactly where you're talking about.
Yeah,
so Bill, I don't know. I would really start with the workflow management infogram maybe, and just go through the steps before going here. I don't know. Would that be better or worse? I'm game, whatever you feel has the highest value for our listeners.
So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and talk through the steps on the actual workflow and what gets done by the service advisor technician. And more importantly, how does the motorist receive the information or respond to it?
Yes. And then go to the TVP to go into some, intricate details on how to use it, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Yep, perfect.
So what you see here is service advisor. And in the meanwhile, we talked 2014, we have 2021 now. We further developed it and covered it in several episodes. Specialization is the next way of production output increase, right? And so that's why right now we are not only saying service advisor, we're also saying production manager, right? The production manager, a dedicated resource to dispatch techs, maybe write estimates, right? But in the simple workflow, it doesn't actually matter who it is, but just in the meaning of and the goal of production output increase with the same staff, we recommend specialization. So we have the service advisor or production manager, the technician, and the motorist, and it all starts with an appointment. And the service advisor and the motorist, or the motorist alone on the website, makes an appointment. And you see this in a different color here. Our optimized recommendation is build the estimate in the point of sale at the time of the appointment. Saves a step, and also allows us tool-wise to pick certain recommendations and send them in the appointment reminder, which the motorist is then going to receive 10 days and 1 day before the actual appointment. And on the day,
So before you leave the appointment, would this be a great
Yes.
time to go and pre-order any parts that were maybe hard to get, so that way we don't get a stumble when the vehicle gets here?
Very good point. Then you would turn the estimate already in a work order before the drop off, right? Which allows then the person to pre-order the parts, and at that point the work order is already approved. Lots of shops rely on the, in their area, excellent parts supply several times during the day. So they turn appointment and estimate into a work order at drop off, and educate the motorist about the process, including the inspection and the next step. This sounds like it's just a line and a process step, check. This is one of the most important steps, right? Because the moment you can manage expectations, what happens now and what happens next, the motorist does not feel the car is being dropped into a black hole and I get a phone call maybe sometimes later, right? So we talked about this in so many episodes. Educating about the process, why an inspection is being done. And ideally the motorist gives some feedback that they're excited to and wait for the inspection results. That automatically increases the opening rate, right? And the turning of the estimate into a work order is for most of our clients linked to the so-called drop-off detection. That is when the vehicle moves from today's appointments into the first workflow step, which is in most of the cases waiting on inspection, right? And it's automatically done. And that is when the production manager / service advisor can start conducting labor inventory management, meaning who is the most suited technician for this type of work. And that could be skill, could be availability. And then on the TVP, by moving on the tech view the vehicle to the tech, the assignment happens. A technician gets a nuclear PowerPoint catastrophe signal on the tablet, so it cannot be ignored, and starts performing the work order, the jobs on the work order, ideally in the order as it is, and mark the job as finished. So we recommend have always the inspection as the first job on the work order.
So when you're dispatching from here, so you're saying that we need to consider the skill level of the technician, their availability, and there's one third one that we want to do is also the balance of hours across the shop, so we don't get anybody thinking we're playing favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Good point.
That's
Very
important.
good point.
Yep.
Very important. Yeah. It eliminates all the envy about, favoritism, as you just
That
said.
guy's getting all the gravy.
Exactly. So a really important point is that the techs mark the job as finished as they are finished. If that's not being done, Paul would have been right to not stay at the desk, right? Because
Right.
You don't know when the job is finished, so you don't know what the progress is, so you have to go back and ask, right? Or use chat, which is an additional work to be done. So the moment the text says the job is finished, if it is the inspection job and marked as such, right, then the vehicle moves automatically into the creating estimate workflow step. Service advisor doesn't need to do anything. And they get an alert. It's actually more than an alert on the TVPX. It's a task. And that task stays on until it's being finished, right? So it's not one of those interrupts which keeps hanging in the air and then hopefully somebody picks it up, right? It stays on in the manager task queue until it's being done. And the service advisor edits and approves the inspection results, builds the estimate, and sends the inspection results to the motorist. Not the other way around, right? It's important to build the estimate first. Otherwise, you get phone calls with questions you might not be able to answer.
There's even one thing that's worse than that is you get a phone call and the service writer goes into survival mode and only presents the low-hanging fruit.
Right. That's even worse. Yeah.
That's always a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, Greg. So maybe we go through the whole process and then look for exceptions and difficulties, right? One is how do you deal with waiters? Others is when you're on a time crunch, presenting the whole estimate is often a challenge, right? And service advisors sometimes vote with their own wallet, right? And then we can talk about how we can make sure that is minimized or even eliminated. But this workflow here describes the standard procedure we recommend. The technician basically through all the workflow steps performs the work orders, jobs in order as they are on the work order and assigned to him, mark them as finished, and switch to another work order with a higher priority, right? So that's where labor inventory management comes in. And Bill will hopefully, we have the time later, explain how that works. It shouldn't happen too often, but it does every day, that you stop working on a car and have to hop to another one without finishing it. And for this, you can use the TVP to switch priorities. The motorist in this step receives the inspection results, and then the service advisor moves it for waiting for approval, the vehicle, in which the service advisor watches the motorist research time, which in real time updates every 10 seconds and produces the number of seconds a motorist actively looks at the inspection results, actively, not just having a browser open on their mobile phone and sitting in a business meeting and doing something else. Has to be active, right? Has to be scrolling, has to be tapping on a picture, has to be watching a video. And in the ideal case, and you can manipulate that a little bit, the motorist calls back, not the service advisor calls the motorist. That is even true when the waiter is there, right? So please send the inspection results, even if there's a waiter in the waiting room, right? The process is the same, right? And then if there was no answer from the motorist within the 20-minute window, then you can call. And the whole reason is, it's a completely different conversation that when a service advisor calls the motorist and applies, wanted or not, some type of sales pressure, or whether the motorist calls the shop and has a bunch of buying questions, right? The service advisor then gets the approval for the jobs and marks the jobs as declined in the point of sale or deferred, or whatever the point of sale term is for recommendations which will not be performed at this visit, but should be on in a queue for the next visit. The next step is order parts. We forgot to mention the smart markers. Smart markers are an incredible tool for making everybody in the shop aware, not only the service advisor, what's special about this vehicle, like the waiter, which automatically increases priority and accuracy of the promises, especially the promised time. And in this case, you would just set a smart marker for the time and the parts are supposed to arrive, right? Same day, 10 a.m., same day, 2 p.m., right? And so everybody in the shop sees on the TVP when the parts arrive. That helps the labor inventory management a big deal, right? Could be the next day. You can do that too. Technician cranks out work. There's no change, right? And then we go into work finished, meaning parts have arrived. You conduct, again, labor inventory management. Some shops pile up more work for the same tech who is already working on the vehicle. Other shops look at the same numbers like in the morning and see what is the most balanced approach to have skills and availability managed so maximum output can be created. So it's not unusual that different techs work then on the same car based on the approval of the work. So you have a constant smooth running of the whole shop and not just stick with one tech for one car, for one vehicle. You see on the right-hand side also our proposal to use the workflow notifications, so the motorist has some sense of progress. And so for pickup, we basically almost think it's mandatory, right? It helps the shop and the motorist to, oh, it's ready, I can pick it up. But we also recommend to do it for other steps, because that keeps the motorist engaged. They actually look at their phone more often. You know, all the Domino's pizza tracker phenomenon. Although you're just interested in the end results of getting the pizza delivered, you all of a sudden get hooked on, hey, what's the progress, right? When, you know, it's actually a game almost, gamifies the experience. And then at pickup, the invoice is prepared and presented. Sorry, there's a typo. And then most important thing is, after getting the payment done digitally or otherwise, talk about what recommendations are pending for the next visit, educate on the why, and in the ideal case, schedule the next appointment. And on the side of the motorist, they get educated and agree to the next appointment, which is a confirmed next appointment. So that's the simplified standard process for workflow. Greg, and Bill, any additions you guys want to make?
No,
Corrections?
well, again, it kind of speaks to what we were saying before. That's been the workflow process for 100 years in shops, right?
Right.
It's just now it's organized and it's laid out and it's in stone, right? It's not flipping around all over the place.
So there's three important things on here. One is to go ahead and use the messages to go ahead and keep the customer in the loop. And if you can do it automatically, that's even better. The second thing is to go ahead and try and get everybody to understand that it's so important for the technician to go ahead and mark the jobs complete or partially complete as they go along. This is what gives that service writer the visual of how to go ahead and manage and move things around in the shop. And the third thing is there's no vehicle, just like there's no human that leaves a dentist's office or a doctor's office that doesn't need a next service visit. There's no vehicle that leaves your shop that doesn't have some type of next service due.
So yeah, the difficulties come in when you have to shift priorities or parts are not available or other interrupts, right?
So your analogy
Greg,
that we talked about years ago is, running a vehicle from one part of the visit to the next is kind of like rolling logs down a river. You might have to touch that same log 3 or 4 times to keep it going in the right direction. So,
right.
And there's many times the repair orders goes through, the estimating and approval step 3 or 4 times as it goes through the shop.
Right. So yeah, it's a very good point, right? The most important thing is that technicians have no downtime, but also as important, they're not overwhelmed with too much work, right?
Right.
So finding the right balance, and that is where labor inventory management comes in, which if this is the right time, Bill, maybe you can share the TVP and talk about that. Did you get kicked out?
Of course. So we can get ourselves kicked right back in there. So this is a shop that's a really busy shop, and they, use the workflow management pretty much exclusively to understand what's going on in the shop. And of course, the main thing is the visuals here. And, right off the bat, we come across here and we see these nice green bars. Well, if you walk by and look at the panel here and every one of them bars is green, that means everybody's making money. When we start getting over here where it starts turning yellow, then we're getting close. And then red, of course, means that they've exceeded the time. So, right off the bat, if we start thinking about this, today's vehicle page being very similar to the metal repair order racks that we had years ago, or the hooks on the wall with the multiple clipboards stacked one on top of the other. That's how we used to go ahead and dispatch, and then the technicians would come by and kind of cherry pick and things like that. But the main advantage here is I've never seen that metal rack or a group of clipboards go ahead and constantly be recalculating and updating all day long as things progress through the shop. So this is what, is one of the main tools to go ahead and be able to see near live time information that we can use to make good decisions.
Tell us how.
So that's exactly where we're going to go next. So what I'd like to do is I like to go ahead and I prefer that every shop should have a morning scrum to go ahead and kind of let the technicians kind of look over the repair orders and see where they're at and kind of decide, is this going to be a gravy day or I'm going to struggle on everything? And then I like them to go ahead and report to the service advisor, and I like them to go ahead and adjust their daily goal to go ahead and reflect the amount of fuel they need to burn during the course of the day. So in this case, this technician has decided, the top left-hand corner of their column, that's the hours that they want to produce before the end of the day. And I really like the technicians to participate in settings. We can go ahead and choose the average over a long period of time as a starting point, but to give that technician the flexibility to go ahead and participate and say, everything I got today is going to be easy, put me an extra couple hours on there. And then just to the right of it, you're going to see another number, and this is the hours yet to be completed for the day so far that are already approved. So this is the amount of fuel the service advisors got for them to burn. And we move over to the right, and this is probably the most important number, is the technician's been updating repair orders as they work on them. This is the amount of hours they completed for the day so far. So if this guy wants to do 10 hours and he's halfway through the day and he's only got 4.2, we might send him a message to update his statuses, or at least understand that we might need to go ahead and revise, reschedule, and move some things around. And we can make all them decisions without ever having to have a verbal conversation with anybody.
So just to make that point, if you move 2 columns to the right to Michael, right? The guy has tons of work assigned with 13.1. but has a measly 1.5 hours finished. Isn't that a red flag for you as a production manager or service advisor?
As a production manager or a service advisor, in my case, and I'm sure Greg would probably agree, that probably somebody should send a message to that technician to go ahead and update his statuses. Either the job's been partially done and he just is in the middle of something and hadn't got back to it, but it might be important to go ahead and get that update in case they need to reschedule some jobs and shift them to somebody else, call a customer and beg for mercy, put them in a loaner car, whatever the case may be.
Or, here in the Northeast, right, in the Rust Belt, do we need to change this estimate, right? Do we have a broken, rotted bolt that he's spent the last 2 hours trying to extract, right? So we need to find, does he need help, right? So yeah, that should definitely be your cue. Oh, it looks like he's moving along a little bit better now, right? But yeah, those. So, and that's another thing. Here we lose. We give a lot of labor away, right? We've something got quoted for 2 hours and a bolt breaks and it's going to take 3 and we don't that rarely gets passed on, right? So that this is a great opportunity for us to get with the consumer and let them know what's going on. Once he knows and recoup that cost as we should, right?
But this is the first time that I know of that we've been able to be proactive based on visual data rather than reacting in a negative manner when the customer calls us and says, "Is my car done yet?"
Right.
I'd rather go ahead and contact them first than have them contact me the other way around.
Yeah.
So back to helping Michael, right? If I'm the production manager, I would just click on the chat button and say, Michael, can you explain what's going on? You're behind, or whatever the verbiage is, right? And then determine, is it the lack of marking the jobs finished? So it looks like he's not done, but he is in good shape. Mm-hmm. Or what is the obstacle for him to be behind? And then solve the obstacle, right? By reassigning the work to another tech, by, if you have a foreman, having the foreman helping out Michael to get the work done. Just eliminate the hurdle the moment it becomes obvious, and not, as you said, Bill, when the first customer reaction or request comes in.
Right. Yeah, if it's turned into a heat case, it takes a while to put the fire out.
Right. Cool. what else do you see? Oh, it's actually even worse for Buddy, right? 15.7 hours assigned. He is over and 1.5 finished, right? So there is clearly a need for the production manager / service advisor to look into some details.
Right. And so the time to go in and react initially is when you start seeing this yellow bar here.
Right.
And then by the time it's red, you really can't do anything about it other than just understand what happened. So, you want to be proactive. That's when the yellow bar comes in handy. And most likely, knowing this shop, a discussion has already been had and they understand what needs to be done here to go ahead and get them back on track. But, again, we want to go ahead and be proactive in prevent fires rather than go ahead and just, in this case, they might have to go ahead and call the customer and beg them for more diagnostic time or whatever. I don't know what the case is, but again, that could have been done earlier in the process by just being able to see the visuals.
Yeah, this puts you way out ahead of all of those things, right?
Right.
It's, again, as if you're a busy service advisor and you're dealing with a ton of interrupts, and you've got a tech down in bay 6 who's upside down on a job by 2 hours, you're not going you just don't see it, right? You've got all these other things jumping out in front of you, and until it's 3 hours and you kind of notice, you look down there and you see, holy cow, he's still working on that car. What's going on? It's too late, right? You've lost.
There's another great visual on the screen here that we really didn't touch on, and that is that in the collapse mode, when you look at it, the tiles that are actually expanded here are the ones they're actually working on. So at a glance, a service writer or anybody can see, are they working on the right vehicles? Are they working on vehicles in the order that it was dictated by the service advisor in order to satisfy the customer?
Good point. And right now, this is perfect, right? I mean, that's like,
this is, you'd love to see that, except I'd like to see 2 more green bars.
Right. I agree. Bill, you mentioned the other day, there's another way of looking at actual hours by not putting the budget hours in this case, the 10 hours or 8 hours. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so in the settings area, and I guess we can go right to the settings area here. For the technicians, it gives you the ability to go ahead and put their goal in. And we'll just go ahead and choose one. So I went to inspections and then technicians and then click edit on one. And it gives you the ability to go ahead and put a goal for the day in here. In a lot of shops, the technicians are not quite as wanting to know how their pace is for the week. What they're really wanting to know is how many hours they've already done for the pay period. So if you go in there and change them to 0, this 4th number here is going to be the amount of hours they've completed for the pay period so far, rather than a pace with a plus or minus number. So again, different technicians like to view the data differently. So, you can, go about it whatever way you want to.
So let me summarize. If you put a daily build hours goal in, the 4th number is the deviation from that. If you keep it at 0, it simply accumulates the build hours produced for the pay period.
That's correct. And they still have the ability when they come in the morning to go ahead and say, hey, this is what I feel I want to do today. So basically, they're going to start out with a 0 every day. They're going to enter their goal, and then the calculations just take place.
Yep. Cool. Wow. We have 8 minutes left. So, dear audience, if you have any specific questions, fire away right now, so we can cover it. What I would love to talk about is if we could go back to the workflow management. This is the absolute standard workflow, right? there's probably no step you can leave out of those. But there are other steps which can be added. And I would like to ask you guys, my first one of the favorite ones is put a quality assurance in between finishing work and pickup.
So how
Right.
about while we wait for them to go and chat in a little bit, how about I go ahead and show them a couple different ones that have
Sure.
specific uses.
Okay.
So this is the standard workflow where they can see today's appointments, and this is pretty much the exact same thing that's on that chart. We move along a little bit further. We have a lot of shops that actually have a separate department that actually their job is to go ahead and make sure a couple days in advance that there's appointments booked so they never run out of work. So this, we've got today's appointments, last week's no-shows, and appointments a couple days in advance, so we can use different workflow steps or a different view for a different purpose. And then here's another example where we've got a shop that's a huge shop and they actually have a parts department. So this is a preset developed specifically for that, where the service writer sends it over into this bucket that needs parts added. Then the parts guy moves it back over to waiting for approval. The service writer moves it back over to order parts, waiting for parts. Parts are here. It gets moved back to waiting for work finished. And then they want the parts department also to know when it's waiting for pickup so they can go ahead and gather up cores and returns. So these are just a few examples of what can be done depending on the level of complexity of the workflow in individual shops.
Very good point. And again, it goes to specialization we touched upon, right? So now the parts department, if you have one, is in full control over their responsibility.
Yep.
Anything else?
No, we want to start people out there. So like I said, the different calls and stuff I've been on recently with all kinds of shop owners across the country is that there's a technician shortage. And the first thing we need to do is go ahead and solve the productivity problem so that way we can maximize the staff that we have. Then we can understand not only the amount of people that we need, but the type of people we need to go ahead and enter in our shop. And the number one way to do that is by understanding and managing your labor inventory using today's vehicle page and the tools and stuff that are available for everybody as a visual. So, I keep saying that there may not be as much of a technician shortage as we all think there is, as much as there is shortage of processes in the shop to go ahead and build and grow high-paid, high-valued employees.
Or in other words, before you look for another tech to hire, check whether there are opportunities to crank out more with the same staff by tightening up the process, and that's a win-win for everybody.
I was going to make that point, right? It's we always, our first instinct when we're over busy is to think we need more bodies, right? This can really help you expose some of your inefficiencies and correct them, and you might find that you can put off hiring that other, looking for and hopefully finding that other good tech, right? You may not need them.
So put a little bit differently is the flag hour system was actually designed to go ahead and protect a shop owner from employees that didn't produce very well. And our tendency was to go ahead and take that guy that could produce only 4 hours a day, put him in a bay if we had space, let them do their thing. And if they starved to death, that was okay. Now, because we're getting into the time frame that we have to go ahead and pay a combination of hourly and bonuses, we can no longer do that. And like I said, our main goal should be to go ahead and grow, highly competent people of the different career paths that are all contained in the shop. And, in order to go ahead and attract the best and brightest, we've really got to go ahead and step up our game and actually manage our shop, understand and use the labor inventory, and make sure that we can go ahead and develop high-paid employees that invite other people into the industry.
So is there a cheat sheet of symptoms we could just mention? If you have any or all of those symptoms, workflow will help. How do you know when workflow is is an awesome way of helping out. And the one I would mention is if you have technicians complain for about not enough work or too much work, that will be a good symptom.
So I prefer to use data to understand what's going on. And so I'm
Of
going to go ahead and
course.
use yeah, that's how I am. I'm going to use service advisor efficiency.
A shock.
I'm going to look at the technicians. And when I'm looking at technicians that are averaging 8 or 10 hours per day more on a 5-day work week, these guys here, they're managing their labor inventory and they're maximizing it. But when I got guys in the 5, 6, 7, and 8 range, those are the ones that I got a lot of potential for improvement on. Those are the guys I want to help out and watch a lot closer. So the data is available. We've had it for a long time. We just need to go ahead and understand how to use it as again, the business control panel is like a diagnostic tool for your shop. You look at the data, understand how it correlates to each other, then put some type of different exercise or practice in your shop and measure and see if it changes in the right direction.
So for people who have not looked at the business control panel, service advisor efficiency is the number of hours written up per day.
Nope, it's paid, posted, and invoiced.
Oh, paid, posted, and invoiced.
Yep.
And here it's broken down by
individual employee.
Very cool.
And so that's one of my favorite ones, because if I can go ahead and over time, if I can go ahead and keep a technician that wants to bill 10 or 11 hours a day, if I keep him in that window, that guy is never going to entertain going anywhere else because he's got exactly what he asked for. If I've got a guy that's asking for 8 hours a day and they're only doing 6, then I got to find out, is it a training issue? Is it an equipment issue? Are my service writers not charging the right time for the jobs this person's being assigned to do or whatever? And then I can go ahead and perform an experiment, look for a change, and then go back the next week and measure it.
Or dispatching issue, right? Could be.
Could be dispatching, favoritism, whatever the case may be. But
right,
the data doesn't lie. All it is a way, just like when you're diagnosing a vehicle, the data is there for a reason. And if you use it to develop some type of a change on that vehicle, and then if you see what's expected actually in the data, then you've solved the problem. If you don't see it, then you don't give up on that vehicle or that person. You go back after it a different way. And Stephen wrote a note in here that motorists are very hesitant to booking an appointment. And like I said, that's something that you might want to talk to your trainer about and go ahead and help them give you the different words and phrases to go ahead and help you through that. But a doctor and a dentist, they don't have any problem going and giving that customer the next appointment or guest the next appointment. And we shouldn't have it either. So it may be just the conversation that's being used.
Yeah, we when we do that, I think that's actually fairly simple, right? It's all what you're really doing there is preparing them for the reminder that they're going to get, right?
Right.
So we always just add in that, you're going to get here, your next appointment will be on this day. You're going to get a reminder. If you need to change it, it's very simple to do, right? And you're not making that customer feel like they're committing to something in that moment, right? You're letting them know that they've got some flexibility. That for us, when we do it that way, it works well.
And also explain to the customer what's in it for them. As short as we are on technicians these days, we need to make sure that our regular customers get first opportunity to come in. Therefore, we're going to send you this and let you reschedule if you need to. So always take it from what's in it for them. So we're at the top of the hour. So I would like to go ahead and kind of encourage people to go to the autovitals.com radio and go ahead and register, and also look at us for our podcast to go ahead and we put it on Apple, Google, and all kinds of other podcast platforms, so you can go ahead and read it. And more importantly, find somebody else in the industry, maybe another shop that's having, some of the same opportunities for improvements you have, and go ahead and share them, one of the episodes or podcasts and kind of help them out also. So Uwe, you want to go ahead and wrap us up here?
You already did. I wish. No, thank you, Greg, for coming on. Very helpful for our audience, I believe. And next time you have to bring Paul.
Yes. Yeah, I know he's on vacation this week because he's got a good life.
and he's not chained to his bench anymore.
That's right.
Right.
No, thanks for having me. Every time I do this, I leave with I feel like I leave with twice as much as I gave. So thanks. I always learn too.
Yep.
Thank you.
When you share, you got to get something in return.
Yep.
Awesome. So once again, great episode. And like I said, thanks for joining us, and everybody go out there and make some money.
All right. Thank you, guys.